Hi, this is Peter Jekyll, and thank you for joining us for our Fast 5 tips for getting an accurate quote for your upgrade project. And specifically, we're talking Microsoft Dynamics AX to D365 upgrades. Your presenters today, we've got 50 plus years of ERP experience and specifically experience with the Dynamics AX and D365 since it was first owned by Microsoft. Multiple projects, in the AX world, in the D365 world, and actual hands-on experience running projects with for upgrades from AX to D365, as well as the normal, upgrade projects and project rescues. So what we've got here is a wealth of hands-on, real-life experience in regards to the topic at hand. So if you only take away one thing or remember only one thing from this presentation today, if you would like to guarantee no scope creep on a AX to D365 upgrade project, then I have a simple solution for you. Don't ever start the project. Now, that sounds flippant, but my experience with these projects are that these are much more complex, much more sophisticated than any types of projects, upgrade projects that anybody in the mid-market ERP space has ever seen. We have executed projects on our own that were extremely successful, with the client being, delighted with the results, even though their original quote and scope was exceeded because of things that they brought to the table after the project was started and executed. So there are going to be lots of things that you find out during the execution of one of these projects that are going to create scope creep. And if the expectation is not, because you're used to a typical upgrade project that can be executed on time and on budget, based on some very minor requirements, this is not going to be like that. So again, if you only have time for one, to remember one thing, that's what I would like you to take away today. So this is kind of our tongue-in-cheek question. What does 400K equal 5 million, right? And if you take a look at this upgrade plan that we have on the screen, I actually took that off the internet from somebody that was talking, an expert that was talking about these upgrade projects, and kind of the combination of that graph representing what one of these upgrades looks like, and those numbers up there are kind of what kind of spurred us to hold this particular webinar. The 400K to 5 million number is from an actual company that we were helping guide on their upgrade project, and they went out to the marketplace to get some ideas on what companies would charge for one of these upgrades. And the bids they got back, the project quotes were literally from 400K to 5 million. And what we found out in this process is that typically what we're seeing from the quoting process is not a level of detail or sophistication based on the details behind the scenes of these projects because they're so complicated, but rather a lowball bid to kind of get your foot in the door, start the project, and then figure out from there. Or if they're gonna spend 5 million, it might only, we might actually be able to do it for 5 million. So let's see if they agree to that. And then that's this upgrade project plan. Our actual, one of the actual plans for one of our, recent projects was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 line items on a Microsoft project, very detailed Microsoft project program. And so if anybody gives you this kind of an upgrade plan, the hope is that you have a complete vanilla, implementation of AX with no modifications, and you're only running the general ledger. Other than that, I don't see how this actually has any relevance. So let's jump right into the fast 5 tips that we want to throw out for getting an accurate quote that you can take to your management, or that you can live with when contemplating one of these projects. So tip number 1, it's all about the objects. So objects are pieces of software code of varying size and complexity and various numbers that live inside your current AX implementation. These objects take different characteristics. They can be forms, and they can be input forms. They can be reports. They can be custom integrations, or they can be very sophisticated custom functionality that you've written to match your business. The key thing for you to understand here is that the key takeaway from a coding standpoint, that it is not about the number of objects. It is not about the different number of types of objects. It is about the nature of the objects. So what does that mean? We've seen a lot of quotes where people go out and say, well, you have this many forms, this many custom reports, this many custom integrations, and here's an average amount of time for each one of these different types of objects. So here's your quote. That is completely 100% recipe for disaster. You have to be able to drill into the actual objects themselves to investigate the nature or level of sophistication or complexity. Without that ability, you are not going to get a true quote. So, key takeaway, it's all about the objects, but not just about the numbers. You got to understand the nature. Project plan. Now, here's something that we found again, with that graph that we put up here. We have found a wide variety of project plans that sit out there in regards to to what people are quoting. Okay, and one of the things that we have figured out is that any project plan that is simplistic in nature, right? Any project plan that doesn't have a critical path analysis associated with it, especially if you're sitting in a situation where you have a very specific go live date that has to be met for some type of a business requirement. So overly simplistic and project plans that don't understand critical path analysis, you need to stay away from. And here is something that you're not going to find out until you actually are executing this plan, and it's going to be a nightmare for you. All of the typical project plans that you have in the AX upgrade world are reliant on the fact that partners or your internal IT folks have easy access to be able to work with environments, be able to work with your environments, be able to work with your data, be able to work with your software. That completely 100% changes when you go into these upgrade projects, because now things are monitored and controlled in lifecycle services, LCS, and a lot of requests for environments, for upgrading things, moving things around, you're at the mercy of Microsoft doing those on the back end. And here's the thing. When you're putting together your project plan, you can go out there on published numbers that say, here's how long it typically takes Microsoft to do X, Y, and Z for you. We have found that those numbers can vary wildly from expectations. And so a very tight project plan that is based on your expectation of being able to manipulate environments may be completely off. So if there's not a great amount of flex time built in for activities that you don't control, or there's no understanding of how those can vary based on not having the experience on doing these, that project plan with that critical path analysis on it is a recipe for disaster. So make sure you have a good project plan, and make sure that good project plan is based on real expectations and real experience. Project management. All right, so project management to me is a bit of, for these upgrade projects, I'm going to call this a Goldilocks requirement. We see a lot of either no project management or too much project management on these projects. So no project management is ridiculous, because the number of moving parts on one of these projects there are so many, and there are so many resources both on the customer side and on the client side, and for Microsoft to have to be coordinated almost on a daily basis, that having no project management is a complete recipe for success. And I don't know how projects are executed in any kind of timely fashion without project management. The other type of project management we see is that full-time project manager, which is the other side for that is ridiculous to me. Because here's the thing, is most of the full-time project managers we see are actually not project managers. What they are is they're note takers, right? And people that take notes on what is supposed to be done and then pass around some, recap of what was done. The problem with that type of project management is twofold. It adds incredibly unnecessary expense to a project. And the other thing is most of the folks that are, kind of note keeper project managers, they don't have the professional skill set or the gravitas to be able to push back when projects are slipping. So you need to have a professional project manager that can analyze projects, again, using, some kind of a tool like Microsoft Project, do critical path analysis so that you get instant changes when there are, slippages or changes or additional requirements, and not overburden the project with note takers that really aren't, project managers. So your big takeaway on this is you have to have good project management, but B, don't waste a whole bunch of project time and money with a full-time project manager that doesn't actually have the skill sets to contribute the way they should. Tip number 4 is what we call a path. What's interesting is when we started looking at these types of projects, we thought that all these projects were kind of the same, right? AX to D365, and there's some linear path. What we found out very very quickly was that, oh my gosh, there's a whole tons of different paths that are actual that companies are actually potentially taking based on several things. What are their current versions? What current version of AX are they running on? Do they want to go cloud and on-premise? And we were greatly surprised that everybody wanted to do a big analysis on, the capabilities of cloud and on-premise. We thought that everybody automatically was going to look at cloud. Another thing that surprised us in this process is that a lot of companies are looking at upgrading versus re-implementing, right? So there is, one of the paths is we don't want to upgrade. We completely want to drop off everything we've done and completely re-implement, especially if you have, heavy-duty modifications and, custom modifications to the code. And bringing those up would be much too expensive, and perhaps a lot of that code exists in D365. Now, what was surprising to us is that as people started investigating these upgrade projects, is that one of the paths that people decided to take, as opposed to upgrade or or re-implementation, right, is, hey, let's go out there and let's solidify or stabilize our current AX implementation in the latest and greatest version of AX, which would be R3. Let's upgrade to that version. Let's stabilize that, and perhaps take our on-premise solution, and put it into the cloud with a cloud provider, stabilize that, try to strip off as many modifications as we can, let that implementation run down the road a bit to the point where the upgrade, the upgrade processes are more automated, less expensive, more certainty, more skills surrounding them. And so we were completely surprised at the companies that have the types of budgets that are required to do these types of upgrades, that instead of making that decision of not to do it immediately, but instead go this completely different route. So the takeaway from this tip here, as far as the path that you're going to take, is a true quote based on what it is you're trying to do with this upgrade process may require much more input than typically thought of in a typical software upgrade. There are really complex functional, technical, and business process considerations that you have to consider. So we're literally working with companies on multi-year plans, very detailed multi-year plans, where this upgrade process is not direct and specific and linear as you would expect, but has many steps in it to optimize, the experience and make sure that it's successful. Last but not least, this is not our last tip here is for getting accurate quote. We talk about change management. Now, change management, is kind of a misunderstood term in from a consulting standpoint. The way we look at change management in the AX upgrade world from AX D365 is the following way. The vision of AX was this completely open environment where you could do anything. You or your consulting partner had incredible hands-on ability to work with the software, work with the code, do customizations, spin up new environments, work with the data, work with integrations, all this stuff, right? Wide open, blank slate, all these great things. All of that stuff changes super dramatically when you upgrade to D365. Once you're in D365, the access to the code, to the integrations, to all the things that are so readily available for you today, they change dramatically and in some cases no longer exist. So here's the key from a change management standpoint. You really have to sit there and say, okay, what does the vanilla D365 software code look like? What does that software look like off the shelf? And does it make sense for us to even attempt to do any kind of modifications or bring forward any of the kind of modifications that we've done, beforehand? Or is it should the real thing that we should do here is do this, change management from a standpoint of internal business processes so that we're doing things exactly the way the software comes out of the box? Because otherwise, with this, reduced access and capability for you to do things in a D365 world that you're so used to doing in the AX world, the level of complexity, sophistication, and dollars that you spent could be much greater than you used to in the AX side. So, change management. Should we change our business processes to match the way the software walks and talks off the shelf? Because it's not the same old AX where it's wildly flexible blank sheet. So, key takeaway there, that whole ability to modify D365, access data, work with integrations, so more complex, right, in D365 than AX, that it's really, really critical to look at how vanilla software is going to address your key business requirements and processes and save yourself, a whole lot of time, money, and perhaps project failure.
All right, if that's the end of the questions, then let's talk about what's next. You can always follow our blog and podcast series regarding Microsoft Dynamics AX to D365 upgrades, and you can take a look at those at msdynamicsworld.com or at TurnOnDynamics.com, which is our website. If you have any specific questions about a project that you're thinking about and potentially need a quote or some guidance, or you're in the midst of an upgrade and some things are happening that you'd like to run by someone, or would like to discuss, manage somebody to manage the project for you in total, and please give me a shout at my email address at pjekyll@TurnOnDynamics.com. Thank you for attending, and we look forward to seeing you on one of our next webinars. Thank you.